So everyone, thank you so much for attending the keynote today. My name is Matt Donnelly. We're going to talk a little bit about mobile payments, kind of where they, where they started, and kind of the evolution, really where they are today. So when you think about our industry, right, and you think about all the buzzwords in our industry, and I'm sure every single person in this room has received plenty of LinkedIn spam talking about big data, right, and frictionless payments, and the ever elusive omni-channel commerce. But what are people really talking about? What are these organizations really referring to when they talk about sort of this vision? Well, really what it is sort of the utopian vision of commerce. And that also sounds like a buzzword, so excuse me. But that sort of utopian version of commerce is really referring to the ability to understand who your consumers are, what they're buying, where they're buying it, and really trends associated with that. Because when you can start to understand the consumer and you can really kind of hone in on what they like, what interests them, there's a sort of a more loyal relationship. They're more interested in buying something from you as a merchant. And a key part of sort of that whole evolution is mobility. And the reason is that when you have in-store, you have online, and you have mobile, if I walk into a Banana Republic and I want to buy a new suit, right, after this conference, I go in, they don't know who I am. They don't know that I bought 4 or 5 suits from them in the past. It's really sort of this, this is a new customer, let's talk to him or her and kind of go down that path. But when you start to add in the mobile aspect, I create a profile. I have my credit cards on file. They know who I am if I buy something with my Visa card or if I buy something with my MasterCard or my American Express card, right? And they know my buying history, which means they know my sizes. They know what I'm interested in. So there's this sort of full circle that sort of adheres to that rest of that consumer experience when you include mobile in the in-store and the online experience. But that then kind of begs the question, well, why has, frankly, mobile payments in the US been lackluster, right? When you look at the Apple Pays, you look at the Google Pays, Samsung Pays, et cetera, they're about less than 1%, 0.5% of all transactions that happen across all payments in the US. And that's not very impressive, right? Being that they've been around for a while, everybody has a mobile phone, everyone's constantly looking down on their mobile phone as they walk through the city, right? So it kind of surprises you to think that payments haven't really taken off with mobile. But then if you compare that to some other regions, compare that to China. In China, in 10 provinces, very commercial provinces in China, 90% of all payments are done through a mobile app, through Alipay, WeChat Pay generally. Okay, so you think about that difference. That's a huge difference, right? What is that delta? What's the difference between what we have and what they have? It's definitely not technology. All of our mobile payment options, the sort of the large pays, right? They're all NFC based, which is very quick, seamless. You touch the terminal. The Alipays, the WeChat Pay, they're QR code based, right? Which means that you do need the cashier to interact. You need the cashier to scan your phone, right? It's a little bit more difficult to kind of go through that process, but then you look at that and those guys are a lot more popular and everybody uses those apps. Why? Really the answer is that people aren't interested in just paying in a different way. People aren't interested in saying, hey, here's a new way to pay. It's different than the way you've been paying for the last 30, 40 years of your life. Try this. That doesn't interest people, right? And that's really what the pays thus far have done. And it's not to say that it's wrong, but it is to say that people don't like change. And people are comfortable pulling out their credit card, swiping their card, dipping their card, even though EMV was a little bit of a hassle for people. To them, most people, most consumers, people who aren't like us in the payments industry, they don't really understand the security implications. They don't understand that there's other things you can do. But from their perspective, it's really, well, this is more complicated. I have to pull out my phone. I have to open an app. I have to try to figure out how to use this, hope the cashier knows how to use this, right? And that whole entire experience is just a little more disruptive, right? In a bad way. So the difference there between what we've done here and what some other successful apps have done, like I mentioned Alipay, I mentioned WeChat Pay. A lot of people previously in some previous panels have talked about like the Starbucks app, the Dunkin' Donuts app. Also very, very successful. A little more difficult, again, QR code scan, but they're still very successful. There's 8 million transactions a week with the Starbucks app, right? And that's 16% of all Starbucks transactions. That's pretty significant when you look at, more holistically, you look at all payments, mobile payments in the US. The reason why we have such a disparity there is because with some of the, the quote-unquote pays, they haven't added value adds, right? Again, people don't want to pay a different way, but people will pay a different way if you get some offers, if you get some type of loyalty, if you can do things like order ahead, if these different payment types can tie into your Marriott reward points, if they can tie into your airline points, right? And if there's a reason why you should use this app, right, you will use it. But it's not going to be just to pay a different way. It's very similar to why every single person in this room has a credit card with points, some type of points or some type of cashback rewards, right? And you use that credit card every single time because you know, hey, I'm going to get something for using this credit card. And you may even pay a yearly fee for that, right? Same reason that I didn't stay at this hotel when I came to this conference, and I didn't stay at the Hyatt right next door, right? I stayed at the Westin down the street, and I did that because I stay at Marriott, Westin properties. I get points. I can go on vacation with those points down the road, right? So when you kind of look at mobile payments holistically, that's really what's happening, and the future of mobile payments is really ingraining the pays here into kind of our daily lives, ingraining them into kind of what we're so comfortable with as it relates to mobile apps, reward systems. And once we're able to do that, we will have a huge kind of jump in what happens with sort of the everyday regular consumer using those, those different mobile payment options. So I'm going to open it up for questions. That's kind of the whole thing, but that's really the focus on kind of where we see the future of mobile payments going. So questions, comments?
Do you see that mobile payments, including cryptocurrencies at some point in time?
Using cryptocurrencies? Absolutely. I think, and this is my personal belief, but I think cryptocurrencies, right now I think we have 1,400 to 1,500 different cryptocurrencies that are on the market, right? And I think in the next year, probably year and a half, you're going to see probably 80, 90% of those just gone. And I do think everybody in the past year has really been looking at who's the top 10, top 20 that are going to survive. But I don't think there's any question that cryptocurrencies serve a really important purpose with their technology, right? It's a decentralized technology, and there's a lot of different ways that you can apply software to that. You can apply different systems, whether it's mobile payments, reward systems, website hosting to prevent things like denial of service attacks. There's a lot of different things you can do with it. I think it's just a matter of time until there is a sort of a mobile payments player that is sort of becomes the main player, and they're using crypto as sort of that decentralized network.
A follow-up question. Do you see at some point in time in the United States that mobile payments will be kind of like WeChat, where it's direct from person to person opposed to going through the banking system?
I think so, and I think we've already seen that, right? Apple Pay with Apple Pay Cash, it hasn't taken off that much, but Apple Pay Cash is essentially what Venmo is. So with Apple Pay Cash, you're able to basically, of course, attach your bank account, your debit card, and I can, if somebody in this room, if you send me an iMessage and you say $10, I can click it and send you $10. That then goes to your Apple Pay Cash card. And then you can actually use that as a credit card anywhere using Apple Pay, which is a really cool technology. But I think it's all sort of what's happening in the future. I think the first piece that we need is these pays. They need to be more than just a way to pay. People don't want to change what they do. They don't want to change how they're interacting with these payment terminals. But they will do that if they get rewards. Every your pharmacy that you go to, Rite Aid, Eckerd, CVS, whatever it is, every single one of them has a point system, right? And you go there, you get points, you get discounts. Amazon, there's cashback credit card, you get cash off you get a discount off of your Amazon purchases. Everybody will sort of gear their purchases and their habits towards free things. I mean, that's really what it comes down to. And once we build that into these different pays, I think that's going to really change the landscape.
You don't see it bypassing that as far as being able to go person to person, or do you know how big that market is currently and what it's projected to be, where that it's a direct person to person like a WeChat, money transfer opposed to going through a banking system or a rewards card or something like that?
I don't off the top of my head. I think it's hard. I think it is hard to say. I don't think that I think without having sort of the comfort level of consumers to just be using their mobile app, everything else is sort of a question mark at this point. And I think to really achieve that, to kind of get past that big barrier, right, where we say, okay, this is, people are using this now. Now we can start to add things like, peer-to-peer payments, and they become a popular thing. I think that's that first step, is making, adding value there.
Yeah. Do you know why China and other markets are just exploding in this space, and why we're struggling so much?
Absolutely. The reason that they're exploding is that, I'll use Alipay as an example. Alipay has 1 billion users. Their competitor WeChat Pay has about 500 million users. The reason that they're exploding is exactly kind of what I was talking about, and what we need to move towards. When you use Alipay, you can do everything with it. You can pay all of your utility bills. You can book your airlines. You can, book your Uber, right? You can use it as a search engine. You can buy things on, they have Alibaba is essentially like our Amazon or their Amazon. So it's very similar. So you can buy things on Amazon. So really, people use that app, and it's their everything, right? They use it for everything that they do, and because of that, it's something that has so many touches during the day, people just become very, very comfortable with it. I'm sorry, could you just repeat that, the last part of the question?
Do you believe that wallets in US will also move beyond wallets in years to come and sort of move directly account-to-account transfer from a P2M or a P2P perspective?
Yeah, it's a good question. Yeah, essentially he was asking, and I don't know if we can give the microphone around, but he was asking, if he thinks that we're going to see, payments become more peer-to-peer, where we're kind of cutting out the bank. You can correct me if I'm wrong, cutting out the bank, and you're really just going bank account to bank account for payments. I think it's very difficult. I think that, our payment system here in the States is so ingrained with the card brands, and everything is sort of guided by the card brands, which of course is connected to the acquiring banks. So I think it will be a while for that to happen, because if you think about just the merchant ecosystem, where every merchant, they have to have an acquiring bank just to accept payments, even if that is an alternative payment. So somebody has to underwrite that risk, right? So it sort of, the banking system is deeply ingrained into our sort of payments culture, if you will. I definitely think it's something that will probably happen. I just, whether it happens on sort of the same rails as those payment systems and the banking systems, or if it is sort of a little more decentralized, kind of like the previous question, I think it's difficult to tell at this point. I'm more inclined to say it's probably going to be on the rails of the banking system and the card brands, just because of, frankly, their power, and they really own the market. Any questions?
Just a quick question. In terms of loyalty, you touched on loyalty and the stickiness of combining loyalty to the app, and then to the payments mechanism. Do you see a move towards, obviously the larger retails have their own brand and can drive a very strong loyalty program directly, but do you see more of a play across the ecosystem for like a redemption network tied to multiple brands that, obviously they may not, they might not be a Starbucks or whatever, but, redeeming those points, tying it to a digital app, and then, really incenting then the consumer to use the digital app more, because basically they're getting more value through the loyalty program?
Absolutely. That's a great question. So I can tell you, without names, I can tell you that is something that is very, it's very intriguing to a lot of major merchants. And that's exactly what they're trying to do. They're trying to say, hey, can I use my, my retail points and all of my loyal consumers, right? You're talking Starbucks, for example, right? So let's say Starbucks says, I would love if all of my really loyal consumers could then use their Starbucks points to buy hotels, or to buy plane tickets. That is something that is it's being talked about a lot right now because, to your point, there are so many disparate point systems, right? But people, these organizations, they still want people to look at their app for everything, even if they just want to buy a coffee, right? So absolutely, I think that is the future. I think, when you can go into one app, and whether that be you're going into your Marriott app, you're going into your Starbucks app or your Uber app, but if you can go into any app and then you can, sort of hit multiple, prongs, right, off of that and say, okay, cool, I can also get my Uber from here, I can also get, a plane ticket, and use those points in sort of a, a balanced point ecosystem where you really understand what that kind of, what the value is for the points and everything, to USD currency. So once that happens, it's going to be really, really exciting, but I don't think that's far away. I think we're a year away from that. I don't. I think it's going to be very private, just because I think once you have an exchange, it just becomes something that can be traded, and people start to really kind of dig into. How do you value Starbucks points versus? Yeah. I think the way essentially, I think the way that they're going to handle that is privately. So basically, they're going to say, hey, my points are equivalent to your points, and there may be some type of payment in the background, right? So if it's Starbucks and Marriott, and someone's using their Marriott points to pay for Starbucks, there's going to be some agreement between Starbucks and Marriott, some type of payment. We have to pay you X amount of dollars because we use your points. I think that's going to happen in the background. So I don't think it's going to necessarily be a perfect balance, right? From just a financial perspective, I think that there's going to be some agreements in the background where everyone's doing a lot of different settling, if that makes sense. The organizations are, well, maybe. I wouldn't say it's a public exchange. I would say it's more of, a kind of a, okay. Sure. There has to be some way to make that organization right, obviously. Yeah. So however that happens, it'll be interesting to see. Just all heavy on the right side of the room. You didn't get a single question on the left side. Nothing, huh?
In the U.S., especially, between the individual, the Walmart Pay, the Kohl's Pay, the Sears Pay even, how do you see that playing out with the individual store applications?
Yeah, I think a lot of those are going to die. As I think consolidation starts to happen with the pays, I think the consolidation is happening. Apple's already working on something called a par value, where they can kind of pass along throughout that whole payment ecosystem, and that serves to really help identify the consumer. And having a federated identity of a consumer across that whole system and across all the different players is critical to what we're trying to accomplish from a loyalty perspective. So I think once we're able to achieve that with Apple Pay and Google Pay, et cetera, I think a lot of those other apps are going to start to fall by the wayside. I don't think people are going to put their credit card in Sears' hands or whoever's hands to pay.
We're in Chicago, so I have to do that. So what about you kind of get the data share? Because I imagine the major reason why Kohl's, when it's not failing, wants it, at least from my data, but I imagine that Apple's not going to be really thrilled about sharing the data with Kohl's or with anyone else. Or do you see that plan? How do you see that plan?
So I think the core to that is that par value that I was talking about. So Apple has an ability to essentially pass a value which identifies who that end user is. So it doesn't identify them specifically, right? But it says, hey, this transaction was from user A, right? So if I see it again, I know it's from user A. So you can start to tie that into, we're a commerce platform, right? So FreedomPay. So we can start to tie that into tokens, right? And tie that value into an actual token. And we can say, okay, we know every time this person pays with their Apple Pay wallet, but we also know that when they pay with those credit cards, just directly, whether it's MSR or chip, that's also that individual, right? So that's how you start to build that identity. So you don't have to actually share, sensitive data. You just really need to share sort of that information that those mobile wallets are willing to provide that says, hey, this is Matt, and Matt is using XYZ card. All right, we're done. I got the little notice. So thank you guys so much. I'll be around for the next couple of days if anyone wants to talk. Appreciate it.